It's finally happened. The Maple Leafs curse has been broken for the first time in 19 years. They've won a first-round series. They're heading to round 2. We'll recap what happened between the Leafs and Lightning. Also, the Oilers are moving on after ousting the Kings in Game 6. The Rangers forced Game 7 against the Devils. We'll discuss that. Plus, we're going to preview tonight's 2 Game 7s, including the Boston Bruins and Florida Panthers, the Avalanche and Kraken as well. And we have some trade rumors around the NHL involving the Winnipeg Jets, Montreal Canadiens, and Minnesota Wild. All that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, it's finally happened. For the first time in 19 years, the Maple Leafs have won a first-round playoff series and are going to see round 2. The Leafs won Game 6 last night against the Tampa Bay Lightning in overtime, 2-1 score. Game-winning goal scored by Captain John Tavares, who was kind of a little bit of a lucky, fluky goal, but hey, sometimes it doesn't matter how it goes in. They don't ask you how, they only ask you how many, so it doesn't really matter how it went in. It was just a drive around the net, shot towards the net with traffic, hit a skate of a Tampa defenseman, and slowly went into the net past Vasilevsky. They don't care how it goes in, like I said, just the fact that it did. The Leafs celebrated pretty hardcore. The Leafs fans went crazy last night. I could see all kinds of hardcore celebration in downtown Toronto. Leafs fans across social media finally getting that pain and suffering a break and getting a chance to celebrate, which was long overdue and well-deserved. So I know, obviously, a lot of people, like cheering for the Leafs, and lots of people like cheering against the Leafs. It's certainly an intriguing storyline to follow. They have arguably the league's largest fan base, and obviously, like I said, there's lots of, people like to cheer against them. And say what you want, it's nice to see a team in a huge market with such a big fan base finally get a reason to celebrate. They're still a long way from the Stanley Cup, but it's a step in the right direction. Lots of work left to be done, and you just never know. We've seen numerous times before in NHL history where sometimes you just need a small breakthrough, and then the confidence just grows from there, and who knows? I know a lot of people are already saying maybe we'll get an all-Canadian final with the Leafs and the Oilers. I'd love to see that, I won't lie, but I think it's a little bit early and premature to say that that's a real possibility. Obviously, we're only at the end of round 1 for most of the NHL series. There's still lots of work to be done. Each team would have to win 2 more rounds, which is going to be incredibly difficult with some really tough opponents. So either way, congrats to the Leafs and all their fan base for finally getting over the hump, so to speak. Tampa, I think it's still fair to say, outplayed the Leafs in a large part of the last 3 to 4 games. But like I said, the Leafs always found a way to win. They found ways to come back. Last night, it was a difference. The Leafs got the early the first goal of the game, and Matthews didn't come early in the game. It was quite a while into it, but Matthews scored on a rocket of a shot. Stamkos responds in the third, makes it interesting. And then, like I said, Tavares gets the little bit of a lucky bounce in the overtime period to secure the series victory. It's just quite that simple. Kucherov, I thought, for Tampa, had an awful night. He didn't look right at all, just seemed very careless at times and just not into it. I mean, you gotta think, though, in the Lightning, they played so much hockey, not only in the last 3 years, but even a few years before they won the Stanley Cups, they had deep playoff runs. You have to think that team is just running out of gas. Just so to speak. I mean, the Leafs are obviously rejuvenated. They're, obviously, a very skilled team. I'm not taking anything away from their victory, but Tampa is going in a different direction now. They've already peaked, and they're starting to fall from that peak here a little bit. It's going to be an interesting offseason for them as well. Of course, every year they have tough, decisions to make based on cap because they've spent so many future assets to go for it continuously. That'd be curious to see how they respond. Of course, like I said, we also had the Oilers win and go to round 2 with a 5-4 win over the LA Kings. That one did not need overtime. That was settled in regulation. McDavid scored very early in the first, and it was pretty much back and forth all night. The Kings scored a couple goals. Oilers tied it up, and there was back and forth. Into the third period, we had a situation where it was a 4-3 game for the Oilers, and then Stuart Skinner had a gaffe that he's going to probably would have had nightmares about had it cost them the game over the series. Thankfully, it didn't. Skinner didn't even know that his stick was broke and didn't really have a lot of, sturdiness left in it. And when he went to shoot the puck out after a dump in, he completely just gave it away right to Philip Deneau, who had a wide open net, bam, right in the net. Definitely going to be on the Sportsnet Dang It video for sure. But at the same time, thankfully, Kyler Yamamoto was able to score late in the third to give the team a 5-4 lead, which held on to be the game and series winner. and kind of got Stuart Skinner off the hook there, but that was certainly a stressful moment for him for sure. After reviewing some other footage, you could see earlier in the period where there was a likely situation where his stick got slashed and had contact and likely was cracked and he just didn't know it. But certainly, a bad moment there that he'd rather forget. And I'm sure he's just thankful it didn't cost him the game. Obviously, the Rangers came back in forced Game 7 against the Devils. The Rangers won the first 2. Devils won the next 3. It was looking like the Devils were going to be able to take care of business, but the Rangers looked a lot more like the teams that won the first 2 games. Zibanejad was much better back in his normal spot in the power play. Kreider was better, Panarin, and they came out with a 5-2 victory. So that one's going 7 games. They've finally been able to solve Akira Schmid, at least to some degree. Game 7 should be very interesting. That one will go on Monday night. So we have the 2 Game 7s tonight. Bruins, Panthers, Avs, Kraken. Rangers, Devils will go Monday. So Boston trying to save their historical season. The Panthers are trying to complete a major upset. And we'll see what happens tonight. Obviously, in Boston's standpoint, a lot of speculation that we might see goalie Jeremy Swayman replace Linus Ullmark. Ullmark has not been at his best the last few games, that's for sure. And I honestly wonder if he is battling an injury. Just the way he's been moving in the net, he doesn't look completely normal and comfortable in there. And I do wonder if he's battling some sort of a hip issue or something of that nature. And it could maybe not the exact injury, but it just doesn't look right to me. And I don't think it's a case where he's just off his game. I think to me, he looks like he's battling an injury. And, there was a point earlier in the series where he was a game time decision. He ended up playing. So that's kind of my thoughts on that. We'll see. Maybe it's getting worse and more difficult for him to play through. Swayman wouldn't be the first goalie to come in a Game 7 to make his debut in the series. It has happened, I believe, 5 other times in recent NHL history, and 4 to 5 times the goalie who came in did get the win. So we'll see. The Florida Panthers are looking to push for the upset. I'm sure Matthew Tkachuk and his teammates are going to be looking to pull this off. It should be a good one. That one starts tonight a little bit earlier, where it is Sunday. It's going to be a 6:30 Eastern time start. And then we have later the Avs and Kraken doing Game 7 in Colorado. We found out that Andrew Cogliano is done for the rest of the season for sure after basically having a partially broken neck. The hit from Jordan Eberle, which went, was not a major penalty, no response for NHL player safety. And look at the major injury that Cogliano has suffered in the long-term injury that he's going to be out with. That's ridiculous that there's been no call whatsoever and no response from player safety. It's really mind-boggling how that could be. Meanwhile, Jordan Eberle, who delivered the hit from the Kraken, is going to be allowed to play and, not be missing any time because of it. So we'll see. Can the Avalanche and all their experience last year, can they pull off I wouldn't really, at this point, the way they've been playing is this is the team that they should beat. But the Avalanche, I don't think they've underestimated the Kraken. I think a lot of fans have, and just seeing as a good bit of a coming out party just how good this team can be. Even though they are without their top scorer in Jared McCann, they continue to score first in every game. They score by committee, and they're just playing a real solid team game. So we'll see here after the Avalanche win Game 6. Can they continue on and close them out in 7? Or will the Kraken have a big upset and knock off the defending Stanley Cup champions? Now, as I mentioned, I want to take a look at a few trade rumors from around the NHL. We're mostly going to talk about 2 teams, and of course, they're kind of linked to 2 other teams, so essentially 4 altogether. But let's start with the Minnesota Wild. Of course, they lost their first-round series to the Dallas Stars 4-2, and there's already obviously lots of talk about what we might expect from Minnesota this offseason. They're going to be an interesting team to watch because, as we know, they're going to be facing some pretty stiff salary cap penalties and dead money situation from the buyouts of Zach Parise and Ryan Suter. So this year and next year, they're really, really tight up against the cap. They do not have very much cap space going into next year. They already have, I think it's 16 or 17 contracts, but they only have $3.5 million in space. And that's assuming we get a $1 million increase. So that's not a good situation to be in. I knew this year was going to be a pivotal, important year that they were certainly going to want to, make as best run as they could for, because it's going to be tougher and tougher the next 2 years for them to be able to, add much more to this group. Now, of course, we have some pending UFAs and some players that likely don't come back because there's no money to sign them. We're looking at Matt Dumba, likely played his last game as a Minnesota Wild. Johansson, who was a pickup at the deadline. I mean, there's, I think, some interest to stay, but unless they free up the space elsewhere, not really going to be possible. And there's others too. But one position I want to take a look at is goaltending. I mean, we saw Philip Gustafsson ended up playing 5 out of 6 games in this series. Obviously, they started a rotation early on. Fleury had 1 game. It wasn't good. They went back to Gustafsson, and they stuck with him. Now, obviously, the young goaltender certainly emerged to be the main guy. Now, of course, he's on a pending restricted free agent, just coming off making just shy of $800,000. So trading Talbot to the Senators for Gustafsson this past year not only got them a younger goaltender who they hoped would emerge as being a part of the future, which he has, but saved them a lot of salary cap space for the current season. Obviously, Talbot's salary is off the books, and they get Gustafsson coming back, making under $800K. So it was a big savings too. So it's a win-win situation for Minnesota for now and for later. But the problem is he played so well, and he needs a new contract. I don't think they ever expect him to do that well. He's going to be looking for a substantial raise and a decent amount of term going forward. Now, obviously, the term might not be too much of the issue. I don't think they'd have too many problems agreeing on that. But at the same time, the longer the term, the more money, is going to be tying up on a long-term basis, which is going to be complicated. Could they end up having to trade Marc-Andre Fleury in order to keep Philip Gustafsson? I mean, Fleury still has 1 more year in his contract at $3.5 million. He made it clear he does want to play next year. The way he talked at the end of season media availability made it sound like it very well could be his final season, which wouldn't be a huge surprise given his age and everything he's accomplished in his career. However, will that season be in Minnesota next year? It makes you honestly wonder. I know when he signed that 2-year extension, I don't think Guerin really seen the goaltending situation playing out the way that it did. I think he saw Fleury and Talbot, and they'd have them kind of staggered a little bit with not a ton of money each. But it didn't work out that way. Talbot ended up getting a little bit unhappy that he wasn't going to be able to play, as a starter, and was going to lose a lot of playing time. So he asked, without actually pushing too hard, definitely wanted to be traded. And he goes to Ottawa for Gustafsson. Well, it's a good problem to have a young goalie overachieve like that, and obviously, be due a significant raise. But then you have to ask yourself is, how do we accommodate that with our cap situation? I mean, there was previous interest in Fleury going back to where it started in Pittsburgh. You're going to make you wonder, could it happen? I mean, obviously, Billy Guerin and Marc-Andre Fleury have a good relationship. They work together now in 2 different teams. And, obviously, there's lots of, mutual respect there. Obviously, they both came from Pittsburgh as well. So we'll see. At this point, Pittsburgh doesn't even have a GM. So we don't know the direction of the team, but their main starting goalie, Tristan Jarry, is a pending UFA, and many suspect that they're going to move on from Jarry and go in a different direction. So could Fleury return to Pittsburgh, at least on a 1-year deal that he has left on his contract, and play one last season with his old buddies, Crosby and Malkin and Letang? It's certainly not out of the realm of possibilities given the tight cap situation in Minnesota. And I just think if they had to trade Fleury, I think Guerin would be good to him. And obviously, being very selective on where he sent him. And I think Pittsburgh is one of the very few, if not only place, that he really might consider going to at this point. So, I know there was interest before. Some people think that it's kind of passed, but we'll have to see. Minnesota's in a tight spot and has to do something. Now, when it comes to Winnipeg, we heard Jets GM Kevin Cheveldayoff speak today. Obviously, the players and coach had already spoken in the last couple of days here. Cheveldayoff's comments didn't really give us too much, but it did confirm that Rick Bowness would indeed be returning as the head coach of the Winnipeg Jets. So there's no doubt who their coach is next year. So considering all the players who spoke out against Bowness and his comments after their Game 5 loss and his chosen words of saying that the team with the team's effort, that he was disgusted by it and that they didn't have any pushback and all that, pretty much all the veteran guys that came out and spoke after the game said that they were disappointed with his comments and that they wish that he would handle that behind closed doors. Many reporters were saying that Bowness has been handling this type of thing both behind closed doors and publicly really since back in January, February. And the message is falling on deaf ears and not really getting any kind of proper response. So, when he was at his boiling point where he just kind of boiled over and kind of blew his top and, vented to the media for a couple minutes and ended the session. It's just that simple. So if he's back and he's going to be, according to the general manager, you have to think that they're with all these players too, a number of them in the final year of their contracts that we're likely going to see some significant changes in the core group of players. I mean, you're looking at Connor Hellebuyck, you're looking at Blake Wheeler, Mark Scheifele, just to name a few there. that are entering the final year of their contracts. And of course, Pierre-Luc Dubois, depending on the RFA, who could sign a 1-year deal and be a UFA this time next year. Well, obviously, many feel he wants to go to Montreal based on his own personal comments from his agent. Elliotte Friedman on a recent podcast just in the past week mentioned how, everybody assumes he's going to Montreal, and Friedman himself says that he feels that there's a really high probability that's going to happen. He said a lot of people have said to him, well, why don't they just trade Dubois for Kirby Dach? Kirby Dach could easily be a top 6 center for Winnipeg. They get a replacement player they'd be quite happy with. And Montreal gets Dubois, everybody's happy. He says, it's not so fast. It's not that simple. If it were that simple, they may have already made this trade. So at the end of the day, do you expect Montreal and Winnipeg to have discussions about a Dubois for Dach type of trade? And would that be enough to satisfy the requirements for both teams? At this point, Dubois, you've seen him quit now on multiple teams. When he was at the end of his tenure in Columbus, when he was hoping that Montreal would get him then, you could tell he was not trying very hard. And in game 5 and the last little bit of this series against the Vegas Golden Knights, Dubois is definitely one of those players, in my opinion, that was guilty of not having to push back and not really giving it their full 100% effort. So is this a player you even want? At this point, you have to question his character and wonder whether or not he's the type of player that you can honestly win with. I mean, you would like to think things would be different. He'll be happy there. But, it's already been 2 other times where you thought that was going to be the case, and it wasn't. So certainly a risky move for sure. But I do think after all the end of the season availability here, it's a high probability we're going to see significant deals out of the Winnipeg Jets organization. Rick Bowness is coming back. Shovel Dayoff is coming back. They know that things need to change. And I would suspect that players like Mark Scheifele, Blake Wheeler, Connor Hellebuyck, and Pierre-Luc Dubois, they may not all be traded, but there's a good chance that at least a couple of them will be. And I suspect that Dubois to Montreal is probably one of the more likely deals to do, because it's certainly a deal that would generate a good return for them, and it's a deal that they're mutual interested in achieving. But is it as simple as trading Dubois for Dach? I'm personally not convinced that Montreal wants to trade Dach. Some people thought they acquired Dach for the sole purpose of flipping him later to Winnipeg for Dubois, and I don't think that's necessarily the case either. I think they see Dach as either being at the top 6 center or a winger. I mean, Dubois very well could come in as a center as well. You can never have too many centers in your organization. Some guys end up having to play wing. It's not a big deal. So I don't necessarily think that was the case. I just think Kent Hughes saw that as a possibility to be able to grab a young player that he liked, saw a lot of potential in, and made the move. I mean, the Dubois deal to me is completely separate, although we've seen reports saying that where the draft was in Montreal, that there was a lot of speculation that the Dubois tree was going to go down. I don't know how far along discussions got or how deep they got. And of course, it dates back to when he was in Columbus. So with reports now confirming that he was hoping that they would offer sheet him when he was at RFA. So we'll see what happens. I mean, Winnipeg is boomed here for lots of change. I think there's definitely going to be significant change in the Jets organization. I think any or all of these guys could be moved. It just depends on what they find for deals to shake up this core group of players. But isn't it as simple as Dubois for Dach in the Montreal-Winnipeg trade scenario? Let me know your thoughts on that one down in the comments. We'll talk about it further. Also, let me know some good landing spots you feel for other guys like Hellebuyck or Scheifele or Wheeler. Where could they end up, and give me some mock trades that we can discuss as well. Let me know your thoughts on all of that down in the comments. We'll talk further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.